This is episode number 231, the second part of an amazingly great interview of the PleinAir Podcast with living master CW Mundy.
This is the PleinAir Podcast with Rhoads, publisher and founder of PleinAir Magazine. In the PleinAir Podcast, we cover the world of outdoor painting. Called plein air, the French coined the term, which means open air or outdoors. The French pronounce it plein air. Others say plein air. No matter how you say it, there is a huge movement of artists around the world who are going outdoors to paint. And this show is about that movement. Now, here's your host, author, publisher, and painter, Rhoads.
Thank you, Jim Kipping. What a great announcer he is. I'm Eric, and thank you for tuning into the PleinAir Podcast. Today is a special day because we actually have one of the rare two-part podcasts because we had such a great time with CW Mundy, and there was so much to learn. And I asked him to get into some technique ideas and some things that would be actually valuable for you to increase and improve your own painting. And he's done that. So this is part two of the interview with CW Mundy. But before we get into that, um, it's Christmas time. I'm loving it. I love Christmas time. I love the decorations. And I know this is really kind of silly, and you'll see this on my Facebook and Instagram probably, but I love to go Christmas painting. It's just like, I don't know, it's become a thing. I like to go out and paint where I find like really cool Christmas decorations, and there's all kinds of them around. And I'll even put on like a Christmas sweater and I got my little reindeer on my easel. It's just fun. I don't know. It's just crazy. So you'll be watching for that. I'll get out there here and get some more Christmas painting done. Speaking of Christmas, some of us are just people who we just can't figure out what to buy for us, right? And I know my family is always asking my friends, some of my friends, they're like, "What do you want?" Well, I have a lot of different ideas, but what I really want is, if I'm a plein air painter, I've had some people buy me things they think I would want, and they're very sweet for doing that. But like somebody bought me these paintbrushes one time, and they were not paintbrushes I would ever pick or use. I mean, they were wonderful. They just weren't what I would use because I have what I use, right? And somebody else bought me some panels that, again, they're not what I would use because as a professional, we have certain things that we like and want. And, so what do you want? How do you give people hints? Well, it depends on who it is and how much they want to spend and family. But here's some ideas that you might want to hint, or maybe some ideas that others would love to have if you're willing to do it, and some of us have the ability to do it. Some of us don't. So all price ranges. The first one is like the ultimate plein air experience, which is the plein air convention. It's coming up in May. It is in Denver. When we were in Denver before COVID, we were sold out, or I think we were like 10 or 15 seats from being sold out, but we were like at 1,200 people, the largest plein air convention we've ever had because of the location. And of course, we had to cancel, so we didn't do it. So it's likely to sell out again. But there's this other thing that's going on. First off, we got some amazing painters on the stage, some of the best in the world. You can go to pleinairconvention.com and look. But also, we have a celebrity guest, and we have been reluctant to say the name yet because this person is checking with this person's manager. Notice I'm not saying him or her or he or she. But this person is an internationally renowned um, film and television person. And if you're a VIP, if you get the VIP program at the Plein Air Convention, you actually will get your chance to get photographed with this person, which is pretty cool. But I mean, that alone is pretty cool. But there's, a lot of other reasons to do it. We also have this special VIP program where we're going to some art studios and dinner together, and got a lot of other things. So we got a lot going on. Anyway, Plein Air Convention's coming up. 80 plus instructors, 4 to 5 stages, expo hall, pre-convention workshop. Lori Putnam, painting in beautiful places, iconic Colorado places. It's just going to be a ball. And the great CW Mundy is going to be at the convention. Alvaro Casanet from, where is he, in Bolivia, I think. And Daniel Sprick and many, many, many other absolute incredible painters going to be teaching. Big screens, giving you a good view so you can see up close, almost better than a workshop view because you're sitting behind the painter and can't see. So that's one thing. Go to pleinairconvention.com. The next thing is watercolorlive.com, which is coming up this January, right after Christmas, kind of the latter part of January. We're having like 30 instructors, top watercolor people, all kinds of styles, all kinds of approaches, all kinds of subjects. And if you're a plein air painter, you really want to learn how to paint watercolor too, if you're not a watercolor plein air painter, because there are times you're going to need it. Times you don't want to drag the paint, whatever your paint is. And it really rocked my world because I started learning it on the first Watercolor Live, and I got enthusiastic. I've been practicing, but I've taken the stuff that I've learned, I've watched replays, and I'm actually really happy with the work I'm doing. Now, I'm never completely happy. I'm always wanting to grow. And as a matter of fact, I have one artist I'm really excited about seeing how he approaches a certain thing, but I don't want to embarrass him. Okay, anyway, that's watercolorlive.com. And then last but not least is, if you're a plein air painter, you're a plein air collector, you're into plein air, you need Plein Air magazine. It's been around for almost 2 decades now. And it's like the number one selling art magazine in America at Barnes and Noble stores. And it's a pretty cool thing if you're an artist or a collector. And so it's something you probably would want if you live overseas, or you can get a print subscription and a digital, but just know the digital has 30% additional content. And so you can get print plus digital, or you can get digital only if you're like somewhere you don't want to wait for mail. So that's pretty cool. That's at pleinairmagazine.com. Okay, so last week I started an interview with CW Mundy, and it went really, really, really long, and typically enough for 2 podcasts. So I split it into 2 podcasts. And so we're going to join that interview in progress. If you've not heard the first interview, you want to go back to wherever you get your podcast and look at the first one, or listen to the first one. You can actually look at it too, because we put them out on YouTube on video, and also you have the option to listen. So both ways, it's pretty cool. Here is part 2 of CW Mundy. I think what I want to go down the path of right now is just a little bit of career advice, and I also want to get into some painting advice. You came out very generously to the Plein Air Convention. It's been a few years now, and you did a pre-convention workshop, and you gave us all some incredible tips. Some which you could talk about, some which you could only paint. But I want to get into those for a second.
Sure.
But you have had what appears to be a very successful career. It appears you're in a situation where you're not painting for the purpose of selling. How do you do that? How do you get there?
Well, I think the biggest tip that I could give to all you artists out there that are trying to have a career, you have to have a conversation with yourself. You need to realize that you need to paint what what you feel, what is turning your heart. What are your desires? What do you like to see? And I always tell the students, man, you got to be in the art books. You got to look and see what's being produced and see what you like. See, like Dan McCall says, well, what flavor of ice cream? Is that chocolate, or is that vanilla, or strawberry? What does it taste like to you? And those are really because you're working with your senses again. And so what does it feel like? So the best advice that I give you, you got to paint what you think you want to paint, and don't let the galleries come in and say, "Well, Bob, we sold those red roses, and the second day they were here, can you do another painting of red roses?" No, those are the kind of situations you need to stay away with because,
But it takes a lot of courage, especially if you're starving.
well, yeah, but the thing is, I think if you're honest to yourself, and then you've got enough skill set, then you're going to be able to turn that inventory over. You just got to find the right gallery to sell it, and the gallery that loves what you're doing is not going to try to control you and manipulate you based on sales. I know that that's why the galleries are there. They're there to make money. I understand that. We had our own gallery for 10 plus years. So, but you got to, first advice is be honest to yourself. First of all, don't start anywhere, but where is what turns your heart into joy when you want to create? That's what you got to go with first.
I can, I
Everything
won't,
else
go
Eric,
ahead.
will be counterfeit.
Well, it's speaking of counterfeit. So, as you know, there are certain Western events, Prix de West, et cetera, that are very prominent. That if you get a foot in the door and you get invited, it's a great opportunity to be seen by some of the top collectors and to sell some big pieces at high prices. And I remember I can name two different people. I won't because I respect them, but both of them I remember saying to me, I think I'm going to go after that Western market. I'm going to get out there and I'm going to get invited to these events and I'm going to make all this money. And, it logically, and I think probably even at the time, I thought, well, that's probably a good idea because, follow the money. But in reality, what ended up happening is their heart wasn't in it and it showed. And it actually, I think, hurt them. Yeah, I remember John Coleman and I were talking about that one time, and
I
John,
love John and I love it.
oh, he's amazing. And John said, the people who collect Western art, they know the West. They know the structure of a horse. If you're not a horse painter and you're trying to paint a horse, you're gonna probably fail and you're gonna look like, you don't know what you're doing. Or if you're painting a Native American and you use a blanket from one tribe and a feather from another tribe, they're going to know it. And he said, so you can't counterfeit that. And I think what happens is that we all oftentimes fall into this trap of, I need some money. I'd like to build my career. And so we start doing something that isn't necessarily what's in our heart. If it's in your heart, go for it. But
Sure.
I think it really, and the problem is, and now you're calling attention to yourself if you get into that, and then you're not doing your best work, it's going to show.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You just got to, and also too, I'd like to make this statement very clear. I never got into the art market to see how much money I could make. That would be a pretty ridiculous gamble. You might get into some business where you can really make money, at least when I got into the market. I never got into it to see how much money I could make. I got into it to express myself, and I was willing to make myself vulnerable to a public who would either like or discredit what I was doing. And
Did you
that,
ever fall flat on your face?
well, I've painted a lot of zeros. That's what mileage is all about. But it's really important, if money is your goal, and I won't mention artists too, like you withheld names, artists that got into it and made the promises that they were going to be millionaires, which they ended up doing. But that's a really shallow, dangerous, and self-serving, and I'm in art because I've always loved art. I'm a visual person. When I was a boy, I loved to go to the movies. I love to see the visuals. I love the first black and white TV my little heart ever laid eyes on. Our neighbor down the block, four houses down, had the first black and white TV in this lower middle class neighborhood that I grew up. We watched Hop Along Cassidy. And most people go, "What was that?" Anyway. So yeah, you I know that you have to put food on the table, and that's realistic. But if you're true to yourself and you stick to those guns and you work at your craft, there are doors that are going to open. This is the greatest time ever, as you know, Eric, in the history of the United States. To be an artist, it's the greatest time ever. There are more avenues and ability with social media, with all the galleries, the collectability today. It's a wonderful thing, because when I was a little boy, my neighbors, they go, "Well, Chucky, what are you going to do when you grow up?" And I go, "I want to be an artist." And they go, "Chucky, like, come on, what do you want to do when you grow up?" I go,
Well,
"I want to be
I
an
think a
artist."
lot of us have heard that story.
And they said, "No, Chucky, artist is for fun. You have to work for a living." Because, our parents, your parents too, well, maybe not your father, but a lot of fathers in the United States had to, punch the clock. And, a lot of people worked in the factories. They had to do that. To this day, when I was younger, I absolutely hated having to do a menial job that I had no connection with whatsoever. It was like killed me. I was a bottle washer for Coca-Cola when I was a freshman in high school. And in the summertime, and this is a really great story, because after about 2 weeks, I told my father, I said, "Dad, I got to quit my job." And he goes, "What?" I said, "I got to quit my job." And he goes, "No, son, no, son, what's wrong?" I said, "I can't sleep at night." And he says, "Why?" And I said, "All I see is 80,000 bottles crossing the bottle washer that I have to inspect to make sure there's not army toys, BBs, marbles, cigarette butts." That was my job, 8 hours a day. So it's, like, the old story, counting sheep, jumping over the fence. It was the same thing with me. So that was my menial jobs. I hated. I always knew, Eric, that even though I didn't know God that well, but I knew that there was something better for me, and God helped me find it.
Well, and you've experienced a remarkable career success-wise, in a lot of ways, not just financially, but just in a lot of ways because of the deep friendships that you've established,
Yeah.
the 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 great ability to teach those of us and inspire us and train us. I mean, you've been very blessed.
Well, I am so grateful, and it's all because our good Lord and Savior, how much He loves those who love Him, and He makes ways for them. He opens the door. I could talk to the audience till I'm blue in the face, and some will say, "Oh yeah, well, if you haven't experienced it, then you really don't know what you're talking about. But if you have experienced it, such as I have, and millions of other people, it's for real. And living a life of faith, the unseen, is what it's all about. Not the seen, but living in the unseen. And then God gives you the pictorial visions to paint the scene."
Well, this is something that a lot of people won't understand. I think you will, and that is that once you let go of yourself, which is the hardest possible thing to do, and you push yourself out there to learn and grow and study, the the Holy Spirit just kind of consumes you, and all of a sudden everything changes. And then, it's not about don't do bad things or don't be immoral or don't whatever, because you don't want to. It's because all of a sudden this is the way I want to be. And so I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, why would you get out of the fast lane and get in the loser lane? When the fast lane, I talk about this spiritually. It's like when you plug into the power of God, the three-prong plug that you plug in for heavy equipment,
Yeah.
that's the same thing with God. And notice it's three: God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. The three-prong plug. You're plugging into heavy equipment, heavy power, and that's what I've gone with. And I am so grateful because I would be an absolute idiot to take any credit for anything.
Well, and,
I really mean that.
that as we track the comments in the podcast, there are going to be haters. There are going to be people who are going to be critical. What would you say to them?
I love them. That's okay. My duty in this podcast is to let people know, is CW really genuine, or is he telling us a bunch of baloney or whatever, but I'm being I'm being uh, as honest as the word actually means. I mean, this is me. I'm not telling those people so they think, oh, CW is such a wonderful Christian. No, I'm not saying that at all. And I'm not saying against the people that haven't believed on him. I love them too. God loves everybody out there.
All right. Well, any final things that we need to talk about that we have not touched? Oh, yes, I forgot. We've got to touch a little bit on technique. And so give everybody a couple of things that you've learned that you think may be kind of universal principles. I know everything's changing with you all the time, but give people a couple of thoughts that they might be able to use to try out or influence their painting.
Well, first thing that comes to mind is when Rebecca and I had the luxury of going. Dan McCall has been a real good buddy of mine. He and I both studied under Donald Putman, the greatest painting instructor to ever teach at Pasadena Art Center, and we took lessons from him. But we were over at Dan's studio with his son Danny and John. Then we went over to his house with Dan's wife Stacy, and Dan sat there and talked for 45 minutes, and I didn't say a peep. I couldn't. If I would have interrupted him, it would have been a blasphemous thing to do. Rebecca came out of that whole conversation that Dan gave us for 45 minutes, said that's the best, most worthwhile conversation I've ever heard discussed about what art can be. And one of the things that Dan talked to me about that I loved in his work was in paint manipulation, and that's marbleizing of paint. And it's when you have pot colors. Let's say you're painting a landscape and you've got three values. You've got a value of the sky, value of the mountains, and a value of the grass, the ground cover. Well, you've got the ground cover pot. Well, take your palette knife and load it up with that, with the right amount of paint on it, of the pot color, and then stick it into pure chroma. Your red. Now I'm just using that's the other thing I'll talk about. Remind me to talk about the I call it the Trinity palette, the 3-color palette. But you stick it into pure chroma and then smear that on there, and then the unorthodox way, and the way that the paint striates because of the palette knife and smears together, you get this marbleizing of paint. And it's a wonderful, wonderful thing to incorporate into your painting, because, as I said, we get too many things that look alike, too many strokes that look alike. We bore people to death with too much of the same repetition. And so that marbleizing of paint is another way of deconstruction, only it's addition, but it's the same principle. It's going to give you stuff that you don't know what it's going to look like.
I remember you teaching me that. We ended up at Peter Miller's house. in Vermont, and it was you and Todd Reifers, Carolyn Anderson, and Peter Miller. I don't know if there was anybody else there or not. And you remember it rained, and I had this painting that we had been out plein air painting. I had this painting I did, which was, I was pretty inexperienced at the time, but it was pretty awful. And we had nothing else to do. So we set up in Peter's studio, and all of you guys said, okay, we're going to teach Eric some lessons. And I made each one of you paint on it and then sign it. And I still have that painting to this day, but
I'd love to send me a picture of that. I'm going to see it.
I got to find it. But one of the things you were talking about in that was marbleizing and also deconstructing. I don't remember exactly what Carolyn was saying, but we'll get her on the podcast. We'll ask her the same question. Okay.
Yeah.
So you were talking about chroma. Talk about that.
Well, I was talking about, you when you're marbleize, you take your pot color that's already been mixed and you stick it into pure chroma, and then you'll still get enough of the pot color on there.
Right.
Marbleizing may really work to all different degrees, depending on how much of the chroma, like the red, the yellow, or a bright green, or an orange, or whatever, or a bright light blue, whatever that you're going to, mix in there. And then that will work. And if it doesn't work, then you can always scrape it back off and lay it back down again. But what I wanted to talk about was it's some ways I feel it's unfortunate, but it's not, because it's just the way that God rolled with me. But when he gave me the idea to start to try the 3-color red, yellow, and blue, the primaries, to try that's when a lot of stuff made sense, because I realized that you could paint a painting a lot quicker, and you could get all the necessary colors that you needed based on what reds you used, or what blues you used, and or what yellow you used. Zorn just used yellow, black, and red and white. But so, your painting becomes so much easier homogenized, and so much easier coordinated, and don't get the rogue color. People get way too many colors out on their palette, and then they're mixing and they're putting that in there, and it's like a siren. It doesn't have any relationship to anything else in the painting. And if that's not the centrality focus, which it would work then, to a certain degree, depending on how much it was, and the relationship it had to the rest of the painting. So, but I that has been a big, huge discovery in the last year or so, and I've been doing that a lot. I have added black. I added black with my demos that I just painted for your video companies. I added black as a convenience color, because I could gray down and tone down the richness of the red and the blue and the yellow. I could tone that down, gray that down quicker than just using the complementary, and get to a quicker solution. So,
yeah. Okay. And talk to me about composition, because you have a composition trick you taught us that has stuck. Do you want to try and describe that?
well, and I call it the 7 foundational truths: squinting, drawing, design, value, color, edges, paint manipulation. But out of all of those disciplines, the 7 disciplines, the one that rules over everything is design. Design, I don't care how well you do everything else, if you don't have a great design, your painting is going to be circling the drain. It's never going to be a great painting, because you don't have enough of the out of balance, flat shapes working with the centrality of focus to make it a really great design. I've proved in painting that you can have, which they tell you, oh, never put something dead center in the middle. Well, That's not necessarily true. It depends on how you design the rest of the painting and how you do it out of balance and out of whack. And then the painting becomes balanced, even though that it's, you've got it dead center in the middle.
Yeah. So really, there are no rules.
Yeah. Well, once you know the rules and you're an artist, then the rules are all there for you to break. But you have to know what the rules are, first of all, before you're breaking them, because then it doesn't make any sense to you.
So, best advice, somebody's listening to this, they're either thinking about starting painting or they're just starting painting and they want to get to a point of satisfaction in the fastest possible way, whatever that means. You've learned a lot about learning. Is there a particular piece of advice you would lend to those people?
Well, to accomplish what you were saying to accomplish, it's all about mileage. You can theorize and you can intellectualize. You can take my workshop, Scott Christensen's, Kwang Ho, Daniel Sprick, Matt Smith, whoever. You can take those workshops, but if you don't put all that stuff into practice and see how it works and how you work with it, you're not going to really get anywhere. The other thing that's really crucial with that is learning to really study from the great masters, the masters that intrigue you, the masters that you like and maybe don't know why you like. You don't have to know that, but you like it. There's something that is working within your soul and your spirit at that point. And so it's really great. Ignorance is not bliss. Ignorance is a big mistake.
Ignorance is ignorance.
Yeah, yeah, and so looking at all of that gives you a great understanding of what the public has been able to see over the centuries and centuries and centuries, and label as becoming art in all different aspects and forms. So that's one thing, diligently working hard at it. You can't get to a reasonable conclusion without all the work. The greatest thing that I could say above all of this too, the design and everything else, is you got to have a really good work ethic. I remember when I first started, getting into fine art and stuff, I'd see these little art groups, and they would get together and paint on a Saturday or something like that, and they'd have their wine or their coffee or cookies or crumpets or whatever, and they would paint once a week. Well, they were doing that for fun and joy, and that filled their need, but that's not going to cut it if you want to get into a professional market. You have to work your butt off. But for me, wasn't like really I had to work my butt off. I love every minute of it. I love work when the work is something that is intriguing to me. It's like I said, I didn't like watching those bottles cross the thing. When I was working at the Coca-Cola plant, my heart wasn't in it. And so it was very laborious. But if you want to become an artist and you love art, you love doing art, then you work hard at it, and that always brings dividends. The mileage, there's no shortcuts to becoming a really good painter. There are no shortcuts whatsoever. Some will get it maybe quicker because maybe they have that suited in their DNA and their ability to understand and capitulate and work it out. But I think those are really sound. People have this idea that it's kind of, everybody kind of wants something for nothing, and what they get something for nothing. It's never meant anything in the first place. It's all those people that win the lotto. All of a sudden now they got a deal. They got $14 million. And what do they do in the next year and a half? They spend 3/4 or
All of it.
yeah, or all of it, and they got nothing to show for, because they were given it and they didn't have any respect for what it could mean, how you could take it and invest it. So yeah, you get what you put into it, and that's my best advice. And don't be frustrated along the way, because if you're working hard at it and you've got a reasonable ability uh, of sense, and you've got a reasonable mind to work with, then it's going to come together. It's going to pull together, and once it starts, then it starts moving better and better. I can remember telling Kevin McPherson on the phone one time. I said, "Kevin, I've just got that one leg. I'm almost over that. I'm almost over that next thing. I see it. I smell it. I feel it. I'm not quite there yet, but I know." And so that's like a milestone when you get that. And then once you've got that, then there's another one. It's like, you're never going to get at the top of the mountain. We're going to all die not being the artists that we could be if we still had the desire to paint at an old age.
Well, you're doing what you love,
Yeah.
which is so important. And, the thing that has been very important to me to understand is that when I am stuck, when I'm having pain, uh, that's when the growth comes.
Yeah.
You have to persevere through it. I had Scott Christensen and I went to Russia together, and we were looking at all the great masters at the museum. And, I think, we both kind of teared up, and he said to me, I don't know after seeing this if I can ever paint again, because I'm not sure I can get there. And so we talked every once in a while. He'd call me once in a while. He says, I'm struggling. I can't get there. I don't know. I may give up painting. And I knew he'd persevere through. And then one day I got a call. This probably took him 6 months or a year. He says, I I had the breakthrough, and it's like and it's so sweet and so satisfying when you have that. And then once you get that, you get comfortable again, and then you have to push yourself out of that comfort zone again to get to the next breakthrough.
That's the key.
Yeah.
But see, people are really wired differently, and it took me a while to figure that out. Some people paint, they find their love for what they want to paint, and they paint the same thing, and they'll paint the same things over and over again and never really change the technique or whatever. And that's fine for them, because they don't want the journey. They don't want to go off on a limb. They found it. They're perfectly happy where they are. And that's fine for them. I used
Yep.
to be critical of that, but I was stupid because I didn't realize, CW, not everybody's like you,
Yeah.
you know. And so I really got cut to the quick about that and realized, no, that's fine for them. But I am like a child trapped in an adult body. The child has never experienced hardly anything in his life because he's a child. So everything is an adventure. And that's what I want my life to be at my age, at 77 and onward. I want everything to be an adventure. If it's not an adventure, I'm not in it. I don't want anything to do with it. I'm looking for an adventure. And that's how all these other things we were talking about earlier, that's how these things get plugged into you, because you're like Lewis and Clark. You're out on an exploration, you know. And if you're wired like myself, and I think you're probably wired that way too, because look at all the different businesses that you've been involved in, and all the careers that you've been involved in your life. And then later in your life, then you jumped into painting. Why? Because it was an adventure. You
Still
didn't
is.
know much about it, and it becomes even more of an adventure. That's what's an intriguing to me. It's like I was talking with a friend the other day, and it's like, what's amazing is when all of a sudden, like, I'm 77, and I hear something coming out of somebody's mouth, something that I never knew before, and I'm 77, and man, that is something.
It is. And
That's pay
I
attention to.
when I do these daily art school live on YouTube and Facebook with a different artist every day, and have since the beginning of COVID, 300-400 broadcasts now. And every single day, every single person, no matter who they are, there's one thing that you go, I never heard that. And how could I have missed that?
Yeah, isn't that amazing? But don't you just love those epiphanies that happen?
Yep.
Because I tell you, to me, they don't arrive as much as I would like to, as I would like them to. But when they do arrive, I'm going, I never knew that. I'm 77 years old and I never knew that.
Well,
That
you're watching the wrong content. That's all. Well, CW, this has been a complete delight. I love you, man. You're one of my great friends. You've taught me so much, and I think everybody loves you. You're such an inspiration and a great teacher. And I just want to thank you. I want to acknowledge you for all you've done in the world of art, and for all the inspiration, and also for sharing your faith, but which, by the way, takes a lot of courage. A lot of people aren't willing to do that. So
and I
thank
would
you.
like to just add to that too. I said that before, but for those people that don't have the belief system that I have, I love them. It's not my duty to bring anybody to Jesus Christ. That's the Holy Spirit's job to do that. I'm just talking about myself, but I love, and I hope the people that aren't believers don't hold that against me, that they can still like me and be interested in what I'm trying to accomplish.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. I mean, you're not judging anybody, which I love.
I don't, hey, it's scriptural. You can't be a judge and a disciple at the same time.
That's right.
Believe me, I'm learning that.
Yeah. All right. Well, CW, thank you so much. This has been an absolute pleasure. We have turned this into a 2-episode podcast because we went so long, and it's been absolutely terrific.
Oh,
And so has been divided up into 2 podcasts. So thank you so much.
I just want to finish with this.
Yes.
I'm like you in this, that we do this because we love people, and we your ability with all the production stuff that you do, you give so many people avenues to entertain themselves with and try whether they want to be a professional or not. And I'm the same way. I want to give as much as I can to anybody. If I can be an encouragement to people, then we both win. If I can't be an encouragement to people, then I lose. And I know you have the same mantra about yourself. You're such an encourager to people, and that is a real gift and a wonderful thing to have.
Well, it's very kind of you. Thank you. All right. Thanks for being on, CW. Best big hugs to Rebecca, and thanks again for doing the PleinAir Podcast.
Thank you for the opportunity, brother. Love you.
All right. See you soon. All right. This has been a remarkable podcast with CW Mundy. And as I mentioned, this is the second half of the podcast. The first half you will have listened to last week. But now we're going to move into the Marketing Minute.
This is the Marketing Minute with Eric Rhoads, author of the #1 Amazon bestseller, Make More Money Selling Your Art, Proven Techniques to Turn Your Passion into Profit.
So in some ways, I'll contradict CW because first off, I want you to be able to live the life that you want to live and the dream that you want to live. And everybody has a different purpose, right? So some people, it's about money. Some people, it's about fame. Some people, it's about something else. That's not up to me to figure that out. It's up to you to figure that out. And sometimes making money isn't about making money. It's a means to an end, right? So it might be about because you want to travel more, or you want to take your family on experiences, or, you want to start a charity or whatever it is. So you do with it what you will. That's just up to you. But anyway, Amadine, our producer from France, is going to give us the first question.
The first question is from John Roberts from Oklahoma City. How do you know when your art is good enough to sell?
Well, John, thank you so much. And I love Oklahoma City. I've been there many times. I've got great stories, but I won't get into them right now. I think one of 2 things happens, John. Either you're feeling your artwork is better than it is, or you're feeling it's not good enough. I go through those moments. I have moments when I'm feeling like, wow, I really think I aced it. I really think I did a great job on that. And then you have other moments like, I can't even paint. I'm not sure. And so, the question about whether or not you're ready for prime time, that's kind of a loaded question. I remember a friend of mine out in California, Carol. Carol was working with her mentor, and her mentor, for many years, and her mentor said, "You're not ready yet. You're not ready yet. You're not ready yet." And looked at her work and I said, "I think you're ready." And so she went out, immediately got a gallery, immediately started selling work, and it was selling successfully. Her mentor was looking at it from a different perspective, which was, you can be better. And by the way, you can be better. You're always going to be better. You're always going to be growing. And you're not always going to be completely satisfied with your work. I walked into my art gallery, one of three that I'm in, and this woman who worked with the art gallery was kind of giving me a tour of my walls, and I saw a painting that I had done years and years earlier, and I cringed, right? So I thought, well, that doesn't really live up to anything I do anymore, and I really probably should, burn it. But I didn't say anything, thankfully. And the woman said, "This is my favorite painting in the entire gallery. And as a matter of fact, I'm making payments to own it." And I was like, wow. And that really said something to me. And I think it's an important thing. And that is that no matter what your journey is in art, there are people who are going to come along on the journey no matter where you are. Now, maybe if you're doing, sixth grade quality art and you're just really not doing very well, maybe that's not quite ready yet, although we've all seen art that makes us feel like that. I think that the best way to find out is to ask. And what do you mean? What do I mean by that? Well, I like to have a panel of people who are trusted experts. If you ask your mother or your father or your brothers or sisters or your best friends, they're going to tell you how wonderful you are because they love you. But how do you get somebody to tell you how horrible you are? Now, you don't want to hear that, but that's the reality you need to hear if that's the case. And the reason you want to have multiple people to ask is because if 3 out of 4 say you're wonderful and 1 out of 4 says you're awful, then go with your instincts on that. Somebody again may think, well, you need to be developed to the level I am. Well, they might not be. So what I would do is, first off, I'd say to myself, am I going to sell locally? If I grow up in, let's say it's Indianapolis, if I'm in Indianapolis, how good do I need to be in Indianapolis? Well, I think you got to be pretty good to be in Indianapolis, my take on it. But I would say I'm going to ask some local people. So I would call a gallery owner, and by the way, or curator, I would call somebody who is within the range of what you do. If you're a modern art painter and you call somebody who does traditional realism, they're probably not going to respond well to what you do. So call somebody who's an expert in modern art. If you're a traditional painter, call somebody who's a traditional expert. So locally, call a couple of galleries, call a curator, call a couple of artists, and say to them, and I mean this sincerely, and you have to be willing to do this, say to them, listen, I need some help. I need to understand where I am, and I need some perspective because I can't see it myself. And I'd be willing to pay you for a half an hour or an hour of your time if you'd be willing to look at some of my paintings and give me some feedback on whether I'm ready. And if I'm not, what do I need to hear? And by the way, I give you permission not to say anything nice. This is not about hearing compliments. I truly want to know where the problems lie because you can't see them. Maybe you can, but one way to see them is to put your paintings away for a year and then look at them a year later. Sometimes you can see them. But I would do that if you're going national, if your goal is to be nationally recognized or worldwide recognized, then go for some people who are outside of that local market as well and get some feedback from them because, depending on the level of what the local person is seeing, somebody who's at a national level might see things differently because they're maybe seeing a lot more artists, a lot more work. And so find out from an expert, how do you feel? And remember to give them permission to be negative, because you're not trying to get compliments. As a matter of fact, just rule that out. Say, I don't want any compliments. You don't have to say anything nice. Tell me what's good, or tell me what's right, what's wrong, and then that way I know how to improve. And then once you find that out, then you got to figure out, okay, how do I get there? How do I improve? How do I push through this? And you can figure that out. That's something. The other thing that I would say is be careful not to call on galleries that you want a foot in the door in. In other words, don't do this pretend thing of, hey, I want you to look at my work. I'm willing to pay you to look at it, in hopes that they'll say, hey, would you come into my gallery? Don't even go to any galleries that you hope to get into, because I think that could backfire on you, and I don't want you to do that. So that's just one thought. Another thing is, I learned a really interesting lesson because as I went through my painting journey, there were people who said things to me like, oh, pretty colors, or, oh, interesting approach, or interesting composition, or, wow, that tree really is nice, and they're kind of hesitating. They're looking for something nice to say. And, we all want to have our compliments, but, you're hearing that hesitation, or you're hearing they're not giving you what you would believe are genuine comments. It probably means there's a problem, and the problem is something you can't see. And so, you're trying to get around that problem. But what I noticed is, I had picked out a very prominent painter and spent a lot of time with this painter, and said, I really need you to help me work on some stuff, because I had done that. I knew where some of my weaknesses were. And I worked with this painter, and then I kind of stuck to just figuring this stuff out for a year or something. After about a year, I was getting unsolicited compliments that were not pretty colors, but wow, that's really a spectacular painting. Who did that? Well, I did it. And that's like, oh, wow, I didn't expect that. So, you want to look for things like that. So keep an eye out, and that will help you. Okay, Amadine, what's our next question?
The next question is from Christine Kazowski-Cernitish from Delmar, Iowa. How does entering contests help? They are not cheap, so are they really?
Well, the first thing you got to get over, Christine, is that competitions are quote unquote not cheap. You've got to ask yourself, why am I entering a competition? And I have some very specific thoughts about that. And of course, I have the plein air salon competition, so I understand it pretty deeply. And I've been a judge in many of other competitions, including the Art Renewal Center competition. And I will tell you this, that there are good competitions and there are not so good competitions. Some competitions are just about getting your money, and you want to look at the quality of artwork that are getting picked and winning, and ask yourself, is this something that's living up to the quality that I like? And if it is, great, go for it. But you can check it out, talk to people, see what they like, and so on. The other thing is, the most important reason to enter a competition has nothing to do with winning the competition. Now, that probably sounds odd, but it's about your head. It's about your mindset. It's about putting yourself out there. You see, if you're an amateur artist and you're deciding to start working towards selling your paintings, or getting noticed, or marketing yourself, then you have to have a different mindset. And that mindset changes everything, right? Because if you're suddenly, you're about to upload a painting that you've done, knowing you're going to be judged by a famous judge or gallery owner or something, and knowing that you're going to be competing with some pretty darn good artists, now you're looking at that painting. It's kind of like you never notice the stuff in your own house until you have a visitor, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I need to paint that wall. It's got dirt on it, right? So it's the same kind of approach. Once you feel and figure out that you're putting yourself into the game, you're going to treat your art differently. You're going to try harder. You're going to work to push yourself more. And that's going to have a positive impact. That is a great reason. The first time I entered an art competition, that's exactly what happened to me. There was like 3 or 4 weeks to enter, and I was getting ready to upload it, and then I started thinking about it, thought, this isn't really there yet. And I worked on it for 3 or 4 weeks intensely until I got it there. Now, I didn't even win an award, I didn't get an acknowledgement, nothing happened, but I could see the positive impact on myself. Now, that's one reason that you want to do it. And you want to kind of get yourself into a what I would call a professional mindset. Now, not everybody enters because they're professional. Sometimes it's nice to know that that other people like your work, or that other people appreciate your work, or that somebody who knows art likes your work. Even if you're an amateur, that's a beautiful thing, and that's worth going for as well, because we all need recognition. But you say that entering a competition is expensive. But if you think about it, most competitions are 30 or 40 bucks to enter. That's a lot of money. I get it. But what if you became a finalist and you got listed on some of the promotion, and maybe there was a page showing all the finalists and your work is seen and your name is seen? That you're buying basically an ad that's probably worth thousands of dollars for 30 or 40 bucks. And even if you enter 20 times to get to that point, you're probably still ahead of the game because of that happens. And the more you enter, the better you're likely to get, the better you're likely to push yourself. So that's another thing. Now, also, as a marketer and teaching marketing, there is the marketing aspect, right? If you're looking for recognition from, let's say, a gallery, and you want to get invited into a gallery, if you could pay any amount of money, let's say there was a top gallerist, and you were like, I wish I'd pay $100, I'd pay $1,000 to get that gallerist to look at my paintings, right? Because what if he or she likes it? And what if they pull me into the gallery? That could change everything in my life, right? So, you ask yourself, what would you pay for that? And so what happens is, I can't speak for all competitions, but most competitions have relatively prominent people, curators, editors, gallery owners, top artists. And what would you pay to have that top artist notice your painting? And we have, for instance, we always try to get a lot of gallery owners and gallery curators and museum curators. And we have had many, many situations where they're judging a painting. And by the way, they don't know the names. They never see the names. But they're judging a painting and they fall in love with a painting, and they, maybe they make it a finalist or something. Maybe it makes it all the way to the end. Maybe it doesn't, but they're paying attention. And I've heard from a number of artists who've entered our PleinAir salon who've said, hey, that judge called me and invited me into their gallery. Or they called me and said, hey, do you mind if I introduce you to so-and-so? Because I think your work is really good. And when you enter multiple paintings, then they get the impact of a body of work. Galleries love a body of work, and they're going to want something that shows that you're consistent. You can have one good painting and 20 bad ones. They don't want that. So if they're seeing, that I judged the ARC competition recently, and I saw several paintings from one particular artist, and somehow I could tell it was the same artist. I didn't know the name, but it was like, wow, this person is consistent and they're good. I'm going to pay attention once the finalist names are announced, so I can do a feature on that artist in the magazine, because I thought, well, this is great. And so that kind of thing happens. So this is gallery recognition. It could be publicity and other things, but prizes and money are wonderful. Covers of magazines are wonderful. If you enter the PleinAir salon and you win, you get $15,000, all cash, not pretend cash, but all cash. Meaning pretend cash is, a lot of people will say, well, we're going to give you $15,000 worth of value, and that's just a bunch of stuff you don't care about. But $15,000 in cash, and then you get the cover of PleinAir magazine. Well, you're on the cover of a magazine being seen by hundreds of thousands of people in bookstores and newsstands and all these subscribers and all that. That's a big deal. And I mean, that's a big, big deal. There are artists who are prominent artists who have strived their whole life to be on a cover of a magazine and never done it. And you get the cover of a magazine. that's worth the effort. So, the idea is about instant exposure. You could, I teach marketing, and marketing is something that is a process that you've got to do over and over and over again. But you can have explosive moments that will skyrocket a career. And one of those explosive moments is winning something. I can tell you that there are many people who were unknown nationally, maybe known locally, who won our PleinAir salon, who became instant celebrities, who all of a sudden, the minute they win, we're putting their picture in the magazine on the website, you're putting it everywhere. And all of a sudden they're getting known and their painting is getting known. And all of a sudden they're getting calls from art galleries. Say, hey, we'd like to have you in our art gallery. They're getting calls from somebody who's doing shows. I remember one artist said, the first thing that happened is I got called and invited to be a judge. Me, a judge? I've never been a judge. And so there's a lot of value to that. And, it's great if you win, but and when you win, when you become a finalist, even in one category, like we have 20 categories. So if you were a finalist in the sunset category, and maybe there aren't a lot of entries there, you're going to get noticed and you're going to have something to talk about, something to put on your resume, something to forward to your list and your friends and to put on social media. And all of that is career building and marketing. And so, it's really not about winning. Winning is really sweet, but what's sweeter than winning is building a career that is going to last a lifetime. And that's why you do it. And that's why we have hundreds of people who enter 5, 6, 7, 8 paintings every single time. And they will sometimes enter those same paintings 5 competitions in a row because one judge didn't pick them, but another judge did pick them, or another one after that picked them. And we've seen this happen. So, every judge has different things that they like. So anyway, I hope that you understand that this isn't about the prize. This is about the journey. Anyway, that is today's Art Marketing Minute.
This has been the Marketing Minute with Eric Rhoads. You can learn more at artmarketing.com.
Christmas is coming. Put out a hint that you'd love to go to the PleinAir Convention in Denver in May, pleinairconvention.com, and or watercolorlive.com in January, or a subscription to PleinAir Magazine. And by the way, if you're a PleinAir painter and you're listening to this, you really should have PleinAir Magazine. Just saying, And by the way, if you get the digital edition, especially those you overseas, they've got 103 countries listening to this. If you're overseas and you don't want to wait for the mail, I've had people in Australia say, it takes 6 weeks to get here. Get the digital. And that way you get 30% more content that's not in the print magazine. By the way, if you've not seen my blog where I talk about art and life and lots of other things, it's called Sunday Coffee. You can find it at coffeewitheric.com. Also, I'm on the air daily, on the internet daily anyway, on Facebook and YouTube. My show is called Art School Live. And there are hundreds of artists who demonstrations and talks and things like that. We've done it every day since COVID. We did 7 days a week for 7 months. Now we're at 5 days a week. We continue. We've got hundreds of them. The entire archive is at YouTube, and you should go to YouTube, look for Art School Live, search for it, and then subscribe and hit the little bell so you're notified when we go live. And of course, if you don't mind to follow Eric Rhoads at Facebook and Instagram, that would be cool. My name is Eric Rhoads. I'm the publisher and founder of PleinAir Magazine. Thank you for your time today. Remember, it's a great big world out there. Go paint it. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
This has been the PleinAir Podcast with PleinAir Magazine's Eric Rhoads. You can help spread the word about PleinAir painting by sharing this podcast with your friends. And you can leave a review or subscribe on iTunes so it comes to you every week. And you can even reach Eric by email, eric@pleinairmagazine.com. Be sure to pick up our free ebook, 240 PleinAir Painting Tips by some of America's top painters. It's free at pleinairtips.com. Tune in next week for more great interviews. Thanks for listening.